What is going on, investors? Back again. Time to take a look at Delta Airlines. This stock, like all the airline stock, has been under a lot of pressure this year, obviously due to the health reasons. People are not traveling nearly as much as they used to, as we'll see when we jump into the financials and the rest of it here in a moment. We see this stock is down 38% for the year, but this does create opportunities for you as an investor. I had a family member ask me the other day, they were setting up an account for a really, really young child, and they asked me, the stocks that they want to invest in. And I rattled off, obviously, the obvious names that I think are going to do well over the next 20 years or so. The Amazons, the Apples, the Netflix, the Microsoft, the FANG names. But I said, you know what? You probably want to make like a big flyer bet on something. And, maybe pun intended, the airlines, I think, are one of the best, most distressed sectors today in a vacuum. Probably over the next year, 2 years, this sector is going to be under duress. I don't think you're going to make a lot of money investing in the short term in these stocks, but in the long term, I think these stocks are going to bounce back. Now, let's jump into the financials. We're going to analyze the financials, a little bit what the CEO said on a conference call. We'll do a little bit of valuation, and then finally we'll jump over to the stock chart, see if we see anything there. Now, the CEO of Delta Airlines gave a grim report. He said on the conference call, almost a direct quote here, that revenue may not normalize for 2 or more years. So he's not saying 1 year, 2 years. He's saying 2 or more years. Revenue may not normalize for the airline business. And whether or not you agree with him, I don't know. It just means that if you're going to take a position in Delta at any time here, you've got to have a very, very long-term view on this company. Now, I want to do something that I don't normally do, but in this case, I think it's totally warranted. So we see here, we've got passenger revenue, we've got cargo revenue. Cargo revenue, obviously, really, really small part of Delta Airlines business. We see here passenger revenue here. We've got 3 months ended here and 9 months ended here. We see this time last year when everything was all good, everybody was flying, doing business. They weren't even using Zoom or anything like that. We did $11.4 billion in revenue, and we see that has collapsed in the most recent quarter down to about $2 billion. Guys, that is an absolute disaster. That's an 83% decline. We see for the 9 month, we're down close to 70% decline in revenue for most businesses under normal circumstances. This would make the company nearly uninvestable, but obviously we understand what's going on with this company. We understand that potentially it will go away. Things will get more back to normal at some point. The CEO thinks in 2 years. So this revenue will turn around. Now, what I want to do though, really quickly, is show you quarter over quarter, because they don't do that here. I actually think they probably should, because take a look. So I went back. This is Q3 numbers right here. This is Q2 numbers back here, ended June 30th. So much more in the height of the shutdown, the pandemic type of thing. We went from 11.3 billion, again, very steady revenues. We had 11.5 and then we had 11.4. And so very, very steady business Delta Airlines had before the shutdown. We see, look at where passenger was back in Q2 at down to 678 million. Obviously, you had tons of travel restrictions and a lot of shutdowns and things like that. So we see we went from 678 up to 1938. So we nearly tripled quarter over quarter. So eventually, I think the airline CEOs, instead of giving these grim reports that, hey, we're not coming back for 2 or more years, maybe lead off, look, we tripled our passenger revenue quarter over quarter, because that's exactly what happened. Okay, obviously that would be some, lipstick on a pig, because we were down 83%, year over year, but we were down 94% year over year in the previous quarter. So things are coming back again. Just we're kind of really highlighting just the positives. A lot of negatives still here, but a lot of that is probably already priced in the stock. Now, the other thing you want to understand with these airlines are these operating expenses, and they do a really nice job here with Delta Airlines at really showing you all this. I mean, they are showing you the salaries, the airline fuel, the lending fees, the contracted service. I mean, they're showing you everything here. And so we won't dissect these from an individual basis, but you see they're all down year over year pretty much. So that's a positive. We see your total operating expenses are down 10% year over year. You'd like to see it a little bit more than that since our total operating revenue is down 76%. You'd like to see them be able to squeeze out some more costs, but obviously they can't in some cases. Now, let's see where it was in the previous quarter. We're actually down far more. Okay, we were down 40%. So they really slashed things. But again, we tripled our revenue here. Basically, we almost tripled it from a top line. We were at 1.5. I guess we doubled it here, but our passenger revenue tripled. And so, yeah, we had to bring in some more expenses to kind of handle that, increase in demand quarter over quarter. So things are looking decent. We see a 20% decline in expenses for the 9-month ended. Again, we are way overextended. Okay, we made $3 billion, but we spent $9.5 billion. So we have these huge operating losses here. So everything else is going to look really ugly. Take a look at our earnings per share. We lost $8.47 per share in a normal quarter, or when things were a little bit more normal, we were coming in at $2.32. Now, what this does paint the picture of is potentially these companies on a year over year basis are going to have some really easy comps to beat. If they are doubling or tripling their passenger revenue quarter over quarter here on the top line, they're going to eventually, lap this quarter this time next year. So this $8.47, well, it's going to look like an incredible beat next year. I don't want to predict what kind of revenue they're going to be bringing in this time next year, but I guarantee you that they're probably not going to lose $8.47 again in the next year. So things are going to look up, but you've got to look way out in the future. Now, from a valuation perspective here, we've got Delta Airlines here. I don't necessarily know how you're going to analyze this. Okay, the earnings are in the tank. You can't look at price to earnings ratio because it's just it's off the board now. So I think the thing you do with the airlines is actually just look at flat sales. Okay, all their sales are going to be relatively the same. They're going to have the passenger airlines are going to have a little bit of cargo revenue, but the vast majority of it is going to be this passenger revenue, and then passenger revenue is going to be, I believe, on a positive upswing probably for the next 2 years. Again, it's going to be a slow ramp. That business travel is not going to come back. It's not going to come back all at once, unless miracles happen. Obviously, we're praying for that, but I doubt that's going to happen. But we see here that when things were really going good for this company between 2014 and just before we had the health crisis, this stock was trading in that 0.75 to 1 time sales. And so that's your upside here. Okay, here's your upside. Getting back to normal will get close to 1 time sales with the airlines. Maybe they drive some efficiencies and things get a lot better from their airline fleet and maybe the salaries they have to pay. Maybe they drive some efficiency there and they can drive this valuation up a little bit from a sales perspective, but I doubt it. Honestly, I doubt you're going to get much more than 1 time sales for a passenger airline. It's going to be fresh on people's mind as well that this thing can be disrupted. Now, it bottomed out here at 0.28 sales. That would have been a nice time to buy this stock. I think you could have got a good value on that, but we're sitting here at 0.61 sales. If this stock retraces back down to that 0.5 sales, again, I think you have like 50% upside, at least in a price to sales basis. Now, from the price of the stock, again, this stock has been on kind of a flat line. So we see here that the stock kind of, fell off its ladder here, and we bottomed out at about $20 a share. We came back up and peaked up at about $37 a share, but we're sitting right at that $31 per share. The 50-day moving average is sitting right at 30. We see here right about 30.50, and the stock is kind of trading above it. I actually drew in a line here that I really like this level of support here. We see that it acted as a little bit of resistance here. Once we broke up. The stock really loves this I would call it right at $28. So this stock, in my opinion, likes this $28. We see we bounced off it here. We kind of pivoted off it here. We kind of, bounced off it here a little bit. It acted as a little bit of support here. I think in the shorter time frame, to me, I'd like to see maybe if this stock pulls back a little bit, I think it'll find a little bit of support at the $30 particular level right at its 50-day moving average. But if it can pull back into this $28 range, again, this is a super long-term play. Don't expect to buy Delta Airlines today and it'd be back up at 37 in the next 3 to 4 months. I would not expect that. I would look at Delta Airlines as a very, very long-term hold. Again, maybe like for one of your kids or maybe in a retirement portfolio. I wouldn't allocate a huge amount of money to this. If you have, let's just assume you have a $10,000 portfolio that you want to hold for the next 15 years. I wouldn't do more than a few $100s in this one, which would be, maybe about 10 shares of this. I wouldn't allocate any more than that because you are taking a bet that things do turn around. You are making a bet that, this CEO is correct, that in 2 or more years they do turn around. But how much equity raises will they do? How much debt will they have to take on? How many other competitors might be able to come into the space with clean balance sheets and things like that? There are a lot of question marks, but I think if you are have a very, very long-term view and you believe that Delta Airlines holds a position that is going to allow them to continue on in business over the next decade or two, could be an interesting pickup on the stock because as we saw from a price to sales basis, this stock can make a comeback and get back up into the one-time sales, which is about 40% off where we are trading at today. So there's Delta Airlines, not the most financially healthy company that we've analyzed, but I think from a longer term perspective is an interesting stock in my opinion. So that's Delta Airlines. We'll be back again soon. Good luck with your investments.